Napoleon's army froze to death. Again, this was his first defeat, and this was the beginning of his end. When Napoleon returned, the French people overthrew him and restored Louis XVI's brother to the throne. But they called the new king Louis XVIII because they said that when Louis XVI had died, Louis XVI's son had become king. Well, Louis XVI's son was dead by that time also. So anyway, Louis XVIII became the king. And they put Napoleon on an island nearby in France and said, you stay here. When Napoleon managed to escape the island, the French king, Louis XVIII, sent a detachment to arrest him. Napoleon opened up his chest and said, now look here, man, I'm your emperor. Don't you know me? You can kill me if you want to. Here I am. The troops decided to follow Napoleon. Louis XVIII fled. He was wiser than his brother had been. He fled dressed as a pauper. But he got out of France. He later was to come back. Anyway, and Napoleon got together, but this time he found he had no peace because all of Europe rose up against him. They met with Napoleon at a battlefield at a place called Waterloo. Now, so great was Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo that after that, a lot of defeat has been named Waterloo, final defeats. This was Napoleon's final defeat. I mean, I want to go into a little bit of detail how it happened. It's been said the best laid plans of mice and men sometimes fail. Napoleon had the battle plan all lined out. So he had said to one of his generals, don't worry about the name, it was General Grouchy, he said, now I want you to go and find General Booker, the Prussian who I've fought before. You go find General Booker, and I will take on the Duke of Wellington. The British had sent the Duke of Wellington, who had been so successful in Spain. So I'll take the Duke of Wellington. Well, the problem was General Grouchy started his march to look for General Booker and never found him. He kept on marching. And as General Grouchy was marching with his army looking for General Booker, he didn't know General Booker had already joined Wellington. And Napoleon had to fight both General Booker and the Duke of Wellington without General Grouchy. Well, General Grouchy could hear the sound of artillery going off on his left. I mean, he was going off looking for General Booker, who was already at battle. And some of General Grouchy's officers said, hey, sir, I think you should go to your left because it's obvious a battle's being fought over there. General Grouchy looked at his orders, and folks, sometimes obeying orders to the letter is the worst thing to do. But General Grouchy was a military man. My orders say I'm to go here. So he kept looking for General Booker, who was nowhere to be found. Napoleon kept wondering, why doesn't General Grouchy show up? He'd send messenger after, but see, there were no radios, no telegraph, and the messengers had to avoid being captured themselves, and Napoleon's army was just being mauled. And he thought, if only I could get General Grouchy here. General Grouchy never came. Make a long story short, Napoleon fled. He was captured. But this time they took him halfway around the world and put him on the island of St. Helena, and there he died. The sun had set on another would-be world conqueror. Actually, your book says only 40,000. The original 600,000 men managed to arrive back in Poland who had invaded Russia. I'm jumping around in the story a little bit. All right. Napoleon goes down in history as perhaps one of the greatest army men who ever lived. And if you see a picture of him, and I've told my wife, I make sure I'm wearing a button-down shirt when I give this lecture. This is his famous pose. Actually, if I think of have any ever seen older paintings like this? Now, you may wonder, I mean, I've asked many classes, why, and I was asked this once, so I'm going to ask you, why do old paintings never show the subject smiling? You wouldn't have any idea why. If you had to stand for 6 or 7 hours on end while the artist painted you, you wouldn't smile either. That's the best reason. You can't hold a smile. So they always show them someone saw, and the old photographs from 100 years ago, they would tell the person, be real still, and they looked so somber because they couldn't move, because the move was the exposure time was maybe 3 or 4 minutes. So basically you had to stand really still for 3 or 4 minutes. You have to blink. but the blinking would be caught, and they looked so somber and solemn. Again, they were not snapshots. But also it's believed about this pose that Napoleon had stomach bug, he died of stomach cancer. It was brought on by eating so much salted foods while he was on his military campaigns, and salt was the only way they knew of preserving. Now, Napoleon is famous for, one time he said, I will give a prize to anyone who can figure out how to preserve food. And one of his subjects invented the process of canning and got the prize. That you can put food in a jar, heat the jar, and then when the jar cools down, if you got the right seal, the jar will seal. Some of you might know what I'm talking about. But putting the food in cans, or in jars, canning, and it will preserve food for a good many years. And the Army was using this until recently. Now, when I started out in the Army in 1979, they were still using canned sea rations. But as I was getting out in 1985, the Army went to dried rations, where you take all the moisture out of food, and then you can moisten the food back when you're ready to eat it. And it tastes just about as good. Again, any of you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. It tastes just about as good as it does if it hadn't dried. But dried food will last even better than canned food. All right. Another would-be world conqueror defeated. Something I must mention too about Spain. While Spain was busy fighting Napoleon, almost all the Spanish colonies in North America revolted. That's something we'll talk about in the later chapter. And they won. And Spain has never been able to get back its colonies from that day till this. All right, moving on to chapter 19. Start off, Industrial Revolution.